You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Eric, is that where we're having the presentation of the subcommittee? Or the
I have placed it under staff reports.
okay. So I guess we don't then.
Okay, moving on. Item number 4, staff reports. Item number 1, update on the downtown parking subcommittee meeting. Ms. Priscilla Iglesias.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for having us. I just want to give you a little summary of what we discussed at our previous meeting. We met last week, the small advisory group that we put together, and a couple of stakeholders from downtown as well. And basically what we discussed there was a recap of the 10 recommendations that were made within the downtown parking study. And we just got ourselves familiarized with what this advisory group is supposed to do, what their function is. And then what we decided from there is the next step that we're going to take is doing a meeting with our stakeholders, reviewing the 10 recommendations, and then from there presenting something to this committee shortly. So I'm hoping by the next meeting we'll have something to present to you guys with the feedback of those stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Ms. Iglesias. For the group, I believe some committee members were not present last week. From our committee, it was Mr. Gonzalez, Ms. Karen Gaitan, and I believe Mr. Dickey that decided to serve on the downtown parking subcommittee. Any comments or questions, concerns from any committee members? Mr. Dickey, go ahead, sir.
I looked over this quite a bit, and I think we had some recommendations. From previous. In this study, the city has been. We discussed this. The city is supposed to. Can you hear me?
Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry, I'm having some issues. Okay, I don't know that I can hear you, so I didn't hear that last statement, Mr. Dominguez. Okay. I don't know if you were directing that to me or not.
No, ma'am. It's Mr. Dickey has the floor. He was making a comment.
Sound.
Anyways, and I think we kind of thought it'd be a good idea. This has not been adopted. It was done, and I think the city's supposed to adopt it. And adopting this study, which was completed in 2019, of which I know a little bit about, and the city's supposed to appoint an advisory committee of the downtown stakeholders. And then they bring stuff, I guess, to us, and then we'll take it to the city, or they take it directly to the city. I don't see exactly how this subcommittee is going to work, but there's supposed to be a subcommittee of the stakeholders, and by that to me means merchants downtown, hotel, the arts, everybody involved with downtown, and then we can. I think we need to institute this. Go ahead. That's just what I gathered we were talking about.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you're correct. So we went ahead. What the advisory group is set up for is to bring in the stakeholders before the city makes any decisions on any of the recommendations. That way we know that the decisions that will be implemented already have all the feedback that a business owner or a stakeholder might have regarding that specific recommendation. So that's where we'll bring in the stakeholders, discuss all of those recommendations, and then once we have the feedback from the stakeholders, then we'll go ahead and present that to the committee and then eventually to city council so that they can adopt whatever recommendations they wish to do so. But having the stakeholders feedback beforehand, and then what we wouldn't want to do is go before city council, have them adopt something, and then the stakeholders have issues, concerns, and then we have to go back and change all the language and do all that. So that's kind of what we're wanting to avoid with the advisory group. I think that's kind of what the position was for this group. So to avoid all of that, we'll do that beforehand.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
If I recall, when this study group was done, they had several meetings all over town, and this was one of them with the citizens of that area. And there was input before this company, and I believe the city spent a lot of money to, taking what everybody said and then studying it. And that's how they came up with this. I mean, I think that, I don't know, I'm under the impression, because there are downtown people, a lot of downtown people. I made almost every meeting. So I think, unless we've got new stakeholders, but I think this was expressed back then. So, okay, I'll shut up and I'll let y'all talk.
So may I say something?
Yes, Mr. McGee, go ahead, sir.
Okay. I guess when I say this, just really more for a reminder to myself, refresh my memory, and hopefully you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. When we were talking about this last year, just want to remind, this committee here, the one we're on right now, has, as part of its purview, responsibility, or part of its charter, is parking already. So that's already been delegated to you, as an advisory committee by the city. So we decided to just form this subgroup, and I'm going to stop using the word subcommittee, because that implies that we're going to have quorums and Texas Open Meetings Act meetings and stuff like that. But the intent was, the discussion we had was that we would pick individuals from the group, less than a quorum, and then we would pick some individuals from the public or interested parties, and that way they could meet as they saw fit. And the intent is to bring back those ideas to this group that would vote on it, and then I would take that to council with our recommendations. That's the way I remember it. Hopefully you can correct me if I'm not remember it right, but that was the intent.
No, Mr. McGee, I think you're absolutely right. If I'm not mistaken, that was the intent, was exactly what you just stated, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Gonzalez, you had a comment, sir?
No, sir, I was just going to agree with you. That's exactly the way I understood this non-subcommittee or advisory group was going to be. And you're right, we can't call it a committee, or could be, because then we would have to have a quorum, and that's why we were going to change its name, or just call it an advisory, sub-advisory group or something like that.
Yeah, I think Ms. Iglesias was calling it an advisory group, and I think that's a good name for it.
Right.
Yes, sir. I think it's also important to note, this group also serves as kind of like a look. What we can do with this group is also have a look back period. So once there is a change, we can see, after 3 months or so, 90 days, how those changes have affected the downtown business, and was it a positive change? Was it a negative change? And this group will kind of just keep everybody in the loop. Does it need to be adjusted? Does it need to be, is it good, moving forward or whatever? So that's just another function of the group.
Any other comments or concerns regarding item number 4?
I've
the
got one
downtown
more.
parking group? Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
just-
Mr. Gonzalez.
So I'm of the opinion we need to put an end date on this. If not, we're going to continue having these meetings, and we're going to be back right where we were years ago, and we have it all there in black and white. I think, Ms. Iglesias, if I know you're working on getting an agenda going, or an invitation to the downtown merchants stuff, but can we put a date on this so we could also start planning in advance? Yes, sir.
Yes, of course. I was hoping to. We didn't state this in the meeting last week, which I should have, asked about it or whatever. But I think that I'm hoping to see if maybe we can get a group together before the end, the end of the month or something, and then maybe by the next meeting we can come back with some feedback to this committee, and then say, hey, look, this is all the feedback. What do we want to do with, the recommendations, and then from there, this committee can decide how they want to move forward on those recommendations. But I'm shooting for, within the next couple of weeks, so that before this next meeting with this committee, we can have something. That's my timeline. I don't know if you all are okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll shoot you my vacations because I got 2 weeks. I got some vacations coming up, so I'll shoot you those dates just as FYI.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
You're
Mr.
welcome.
McGee.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Mr. McGee.
Okay, sorry about that. I keep forgetting. I did want to add something about putting timelines on some of these items. Some of the items lend themselves to do that. For instance, about wayfinding signs and the app, those have logical terminations to them. But some of the recommendations, and the committee can handle, this committee can handle it when you want, or the subgroup, is they wanted to see about monitoring the hours and how much money we were taking in, whether it was worth it or not, that kind of thing. That could be an ongoing thing, or you can just say we're going to go look at it for 6 months. That's up to you. I just wanted to point those things out, that some of them may be less concrete as to when something's finished. The app will know when it's finished, signs will know when it's finished, that kind of thing. But some of the other things are ongoing, like they encouraged us to convert as many loading zones to parking meters, to work with private groups. Those might take longer, but if they get absorbed into the main committee, that's fine too. So.
Mr. Gonzalez, you're on mute, Mr. Gonzalez.
I followed your lead there, Mr. McGee. So why would it take so long as far as in the decision of converting a loading zone versus making it a parking, or what you were just saying? I mean, what's the time frame on making a decision like that?
Really, it's just a matter of businesses moving in and out. We're going to be evaluating them all the time. If something opens up, they may want a loading zone, and we remove parking meters. And if a business closed down, maybe we take the loading zone back, that kind of thing.
Gotcha, understood. Thank you.
There's also a recommendation on there to work on public and private partnerships with private parking lots, to maybe opening those up to city, to community members, the public, so that they can use. So those type of agreements and negotiations might take longer. Mr. McGee, I just second that. I mean, there's going to be some things that can be checked off right away, and then there might be some things that might take longer and more feedback than the initial.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey. You have a comment?
We're talking about loading zones, and this is very sensitive to some people downtown. I've always, when we were having the meetings, is that why aren't we receiving stuff downtown, these trucks downtown, to unload after working hours, instead of impeding traffic or taking loading zones? And I didn't see that in this study. Number two, that does talk about taking some parking spaces and making them parallel, and I couldn't find it right now, but there is so that's something else that when y'all are talking, we're talking, get a definite time. Hey, well, this study says this. Why don't we go ahead and do the parallel parking now? Where we can have more room for people to park, and then of course the loading zones. I don't, not anymore. I'm on the fringe of downtown, but I can see, because I used to go eat downtown every day, I can see where loading and unloading zones does impede traffic. And, I know that there was a pushback from some of the, and it's true, from some of the retail stores about, and probably the freight companies, but, and I hate to say this, but in other cities they do it. And I had a city councilman tell me many years ago, oh, you like such and such a place? Why don't you move there? Well, I live here. I've been here 72 years. I love it. I was born here and I'll die here. So, let's make this better. That's my opinion. But I think that ought to be discussed, like we mentioned earlier, the parking zones. But I want downtown to be rocking and rolling. That's my opinion.
Mr. McGee, go ahead, sir. You have a comment?
Okay, thank you. I do want to address that. We do have an ordinance that prohibits commercial vehicle deliveries downtown from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Is that right, Roger or Norma? Are the hours right?
Yes.
Okay, so we already have an ordinance on that. Now, however, in an effort to try and revitalize downtown, we've gotten inquiries from businesses that want to come downtown, and revitalizing downtown is one of the main tenets of the Viva Laredo plan. So we're trying to do what we can to make that happen. But we've gotten instances where a company wants to relocate downtown, but that ordinance prevents them from doing that because they don't control the deliveries to that, to that store. So what we're going to do is, on a case-by-case basis, look at how many deliveries and where they are at and that kind of thing. So maybe we'll look at a special permit. We're not exactly sure how we're going to do that, but we do need to make some allowances for that kind of thing, where the company that has a store doesn't own the trucking company, and they can't control the times that goods are delivered. So we do need to be a little bit open-minded about that.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. I also wanted to make one more comment. This study was done pre-COVID, so we do have to see how that's going to affect businesses now. Curbside has picked up, allowing for opportunities like that for businesses so that they can open up, either longer hours or what have you, So I think those are the important factors that we need to think, and that's kind of what this advisory group should be discussing more in detail. How these recommendations might still work or might have to be adjusted a little bit to fit the business needs.
Ms. Iglesias, and I have a question. Are you the one that's going to be scheduling the meetings with the stakeholders, or is that going to be staff from the city of Laredo? Who's taking the lead on the actual scheduling of the?
Just so we can kind of get the ball rolling on this. Main Street, that's what we do, is we have a database that we can start off of. So, just so, the city doesn't have to do the legwork on that. We'll as much to the businesses that this, continues. So we'll play a role as much as the city allows us to play that role. So it's really, I guess a give and take type of thing, but we can take that on.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for the clarification. Any other comments, concerns regarding item number 5? All right, so let's go ahead and move on. Item number 6, discussion and possible action on the following. Number 1, speed hump ordinance. Mr. McGee?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to discuss with the group today, with the panel committee, the current ordinance that we have, and compare and contrast that to how other cities are doing their speed humps, and see if the committee has any recommendations, or we leave it as is. I have a presentation to give. Let me see if I can share my screen adequately here.
Just for the record, Ms. Selena Costabella has joined us. I'm sorry, Mr. McGee, go ahead, sir.
Okay, let me see. I'm not really adept at sharing my screen, but we'll try it. So let me know if you see a presentation.
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, great. All right. I'll go through these slides, and if there's any questions that come up as we go, then let me know. Okay. Basically, we want to talk about the ordinance that we have now, what other cities are doing, how we compare, how we think that the ordinance is being misinterpreted right now, some examples of what effects that misinterpretation has, and then some suggestions on what we can do or not do. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Hopefully you can see this, and I'll try to explain where you may not be able to read that small lettering, but there's a flow chart. I'm going to start from the right side. And what I did is I took the existing city ordinance and took all that verbiage and tried to put it in something where I could follow. And I prepared this a while back for council, and so I'm bringing it to you. Hopefully this makes more sense graphically than it does just a bunch of wording. Okay. So starting from the top, can you see where it says petition from residents on the right-hand side? Okay. That's the way that the ordinance is written right now, is that the residents are the ones that's supposed to start this whole process. 75% of the residents that live within the study area, which is defined as 1,100 feet, need to be in support of this proposed speed hump. So that's the first one. Okay. The second one, it needs to be located in a strictly residential neighborhood. And then the bigger triangle there in the middle, it has a bunch of other criteria. For instance, it can only be on a local street. It can't be a collector road. It can't be a larger street like that. It's got to have between greater than 500 vehicles a day and less than 3,000. So it's not meant for large roads that have a lot of vehicles on it. We're supposed to do a speed study to see if it really is a matter of speeding. Okay, not just someone's perception. Another one is that the fire and police department have to approve that that's a good road to put it on. And then the last one is, again, that it's not classified as a collector or arterial. If those things are met, then according to the ordinance we have right now, then there's a cost sharing involved with the citizens that want the speed hump. Depending on how much the speed is, they pay more or less. If the citizens cannot get the money together, then they always have the opportunity to talk to the city and see if the city will fund it or share the cost with them. That's what we call just the regular method. Okay, everyone still with me so far? Okay.
Yes, sir. Can I ask a question really quick?
Of course.
Does this include like HOAs, privately owned subdivisions, and this process that you're talking about, or is it strictly for public or without HOAs?
On private land, I'm not really sure it really applies to that or not. I have to double check that. I would say no off the top of my head, but I'm not quoting anything from the ordinance. I didn't see
Can you check La Bota?
Yes.
Okay.
We can look into it.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And then what you're seeing now is the second half of the ordinance, and it's basically labeled as a special provision because that's how it addresses it. And this is where the city council can initiate a request for a speed hump. Okay. The first triangle you see on the top is that if the specific hazard really exists. In other words, it just can't be because somebody wants it. The next triangle going down is, was there a study conducted? And then the next triangle going down, the 85th percentile speed needs to be greater than 30 miles an hour, street length greater than 700 feet. Does police and fire approve? Have there been at least one accident in the last year? Is there a safety hazard that can be identified? If all those things are met, then the city council can vote on that speed hump. Okay, any questions about that right now?
Dan, you said that if all conditions are met?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this is what other cities are doing with their ordinances, and I guess I'm using the wrong word there because the cities that we looked into, not that we looked into every Texas city, but we looked at San Antonio, Austin, Corpus, Dallas, and some of the other cities, is no other city has ordinances for speed humps. They're all done by policy. In which it's in a manual somewhere as part of the the traffic section policies or things like that. So it doesn't go to council. Okay, and I can read through these if you want, but basically that's what the whole thing is about, is that they basically leave it up to the traffic section or the engineer. Okay, I'll move on. Can you guys see these the presentation okay? Slides?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I prefer that. Maybe if you get rid of the next slide to make the
Okay, let me see if I know how to do that.
on the display settings.
Display settings, let's see. Swap presenter view and slideshow. Is that better? No, worse?
We lost the, we lost the, we lost
Okay,
the
I
sharing.
lost the presentation.
yeah, let me try again.
Yeah, it's the swap the presentation slide, sir.
Okay. What can you see there?
There you go.
Okay. Okay, let me. All right, so this is a comparison of cities that we did. And it basically shows that they're more or less doing the same thing we are, except they're doing it by policy, not by ordinance. And now I can't figure out how to go to the next one.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Did we just look at these grossly, these other cities, or did we look at cities closest to our size? I think Plano's closer to our size, or one of those smaller ones that San Antonio. I think we're different than San Antonio, but
Yeah.
I'm talking about size.
Yeah, we try to find some in the valley, you know, the McAllens and Harlingens, and we just couldn't find anything on their websites for that. I'm not sure if we looked at like Plano, but we can always go back and see what they're doing.
Plano's there, and some of the those other small cities.
Okay.
So you've got Plano, and you've got
Okay. Yeah. So that's what I say. Yeah, Plano. Sorry. Yeah, Plano, Irving. They have policies, not ordinances. If you can see the second column, it says SH ordinance, speed hump ordinance. Laredo's has a yes, and everyone else has a no.
We're basically the only one.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
But we look into how effective they are compared to the way we do. Just compare,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
If we're better, we keep ours. If we think that we can adopt what they're doing, well, pues chihuahua, I mean, it goes better for us if you know.
Well, the point we're really trying to show today is not so much that we're doing better than them. It's just that the ordinance that we have now of how we think it's not being utilized the way it was intended. But let me get to that point. Hopefully I can get to it, and let me know if I am making the point. These are the things that we have in common. You know, we all use the 85th percentile speed. Traffic volumes need to be more than 400 or 500 per day. The lanes to the street are very similar. The fire chief and police chief all have to approve. They shouldn't obstruct emergency vehicles. You know, if it's on a route where it's close to hospital, you know, we don't want those things where ambulances going through. Must be residential, speed limit of 30 miles an hour, those kind of things, right? And then here is where we think the current ordinance that we have, the way it's being presented at City Council is, first of all, the fire chief and the police chief here in Laredo, they're not commenting on the ones that are going in. Okay, they're not given the opportunity to that. During City Council meetings, most of the time, a speed hump is approved without any discussion at all. And there are times where a citizen will send their comments saying that they don't want a speed hump there, and no, there's no discussion on that. There's no mention about how many homeowners wanted the speed hump, and we get a lot of calls here in the traffic department when we put a speed hump on somebody's street and said, "Well, who put this here? We don't want it." And sometimes there'll be 5-6 people from that same block calling to say that they don't want a speed hump. And then traffic studies and data are not being used to support that, even though the special provision does originate in council, but it still says that a study has to be conducted. And we've gone in after city council approves speed humps. I will still send my guys to collect speed data, and the data shows that people are traveling sometimes 28, 29 miles an hour on average, not even 30 miles an hour. Yes, sir.
Mr. Dickey, go ahead, sir.
Why isn't the city council list? I mean, this is their own law here. I mean, why aren't they asking the fire chief and police chief? Why aren't they following their own deal? Why? I mean, and you hit a great point, because you do your study and you've got traffic doing 28 miles an hour dropping the humps there. I'll shut up now.
Yeah.
Mr. Arguin, if I can add to what Mr. Dickey's saying, do our council, do they know this? Do they know what the ordinance is about regarding all the steps and the checks and balances and all that stuff? Or?
Well, I really don't know, but I think that's the reason I labeled this slide misinterpretation. I'm not sure that they know, because it's been handled like this for a while. So we have new councilmen that come in and they're probably told by someone else, if you want a speed hump, just put it on the agenda and it gets passed. Mm-hmm. They do, and it's, I guess, a little funny in my point of view is that the current speed hump ordinance, okay, it's really labeled, okay, it's a speed hump, but a speed hump is different from what we're using right now, which is so I'm trying to find the exact verbiage, so I don't want to lead you down the wrong definition here. We used to have speed cushions. I'm sure you've seen those out there, the ones that have they're rubber and they leave space for the fire trucks to go over them. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was the original installation. Okay. What we're doing now is speed humps where it's all made out of asphalt. So the ordinance, the way it's written right now, only allows the speed cushions. So they will say, we're going to use a special provision and we're going to change the speed cushion to a speed hump from the rubber one to the asphalt one. So I think they're trying to be attentive to what the ordinance says, because they're making a point out of that, but they're not following, in my opinion, the rest of the ordinance.
I think it may be beneficial, and I'm just maybe sending this information to city council just so that they can be aware of the requirements that are currently listed on the ordinance. I'm not sure if that'll change much, but at least they have the information. Mr. Dickey, go ahead, sir. You have a comment?
Well, I have an ordinance if they're doing their own thing. I mean,
exactly.
Exactly. Well, my intent here today is to show you the ordinance as it stands, and then you are their representatives. And if you see it their way, then that's fine. And if you see it my way, then we can try and educate them about what it should be doing, or I have some suggestions about what we could do with the ordinance. Let me go to the next slide. Is that okay? Any other questions? All right. One of the reasons you're probably wondering, well, what's the big deal? Why are we talking speed humps? If we're doing 2 a year, what's the big deal, right? But throughout the city, we're fast approaching 600 speed humps throughout the city. And I'm going to show you a few pictures or photos in a few minutes of how that affects the drivers that we have out there. But first I wanted to put some dollar signs on this. Is every speed hump to install costs $2,500. Okay, and a lot of times that's coming from the councilman's district money. Okay, on top of that, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, is a speed hump needs to be well delineated, well striped, and have good signs on it, because if it's at night, that asphalt blends into the other asphalt, and you don't want to be that person, driving at midnight and not have good good view of the speed hump, you'll be flying over that thing. So we have to make sure that those things are always striped, et cetera. Well, we put some preliminary numbers together, just ballpark numbers, but we think it's going to be costing us about $300,000 every year just to do half of them, be alternating from doing them. So every time we add another speed hump, it increases our maintenance costs for the city. Okay. And just to put it in perspective, like everything else, inflation, our paint prices have doubled since last year to this year. And the city keeps growing. Our budget doesn't grow very much with it, but we have a lot more subdivisions we have to patrol and inspect for striping and signs and that kind of thing. So every little thing that I can do to bring down that maintenance cost is something that helps the city, in my opinion. Any questions on these? Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
You said you had a recommendation? I think that's very important, what you recommend. You deal with this every day.
Right. And I'm going to show you some photos that show some speed humps that maybe should have been or not should have been installed. So, and then you guys let me know. For instance, here is here's an example. It's in the north side areas, but we have 3 speed humps that are within less than 200 feet of each other. One is around a corner. Can you all guys see that?
Yes, sir. Whose bright idea was that?
Well, like I said, most of these were put on the agenda, city council, and the city council voted on, and then we're required to install them after that according to the way they interpret the current ordinance. Okay, let me go to another one. Here's another. This is an interesting one. You guys familiar with Sanders and Saunders, right? Different streets. Okay. On the left side, you'll see a little red box. That's a traffic signal. US 59 or Business 59 now. We have a traffic signal there. On the right side, we have a stop sign. Okay. So we're supposed to have 1,100 feet of no stop signs, no traffic signals to slow people down. Well, here we put, you see we're speed hump right in the middle of that second block. So we just finished installing one there. Okay. Not judging, but we did take some counts on this, and the speed was very low. You can't imagine people would be going very, very fast when you have a traffic signal on one side and a stop sign on the other. Okay. Moving on to this one. This is on Sanders also. You see that stop sign to the top of the picture, the photo? So we're looking at 150 feet away from a stop sign, which does not fit the current ordinance. Okay. Here's another one. These were called speed tables. These are a little bit, they function like speed humps, but the top of it is flatter. You can go 20 feet or so before it goes back down. These were installed on these are not residential streets. These are collectors. The residential streets. Can you see my mouse moving? Here in the middle?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Those are residential streets. It's where the houses actually are. Okay. Out here, these are not residential streets. Okay. Moving on. This is the same area. And here's some other ones. We have these are all locations. We have them to, every red box is encompassing some that are questionable. Pine Street, it's a residential now, but we have a traffic signal on that block. Los Presidentes to the very far right, that's the one that goes around the school. That's a major street. Zacatecas, if anybody knows that area, around where the school is. Those don't meet the criteria that the ordinance has right now. And this one, okay, that's just to show you that they're collectors. And these are some suggestions. By no means is it a conclusive list. It's just some things we came up with. The first one would be just to be like every other city. Let's not have an ordinance. The city council dictates the placement of speed humps. You know, they let their engineers do it. Let us do it. And then we do our studies, and if we need to do something, of course, we're going to do it. That's, you know, as our ethics as engineers is to do the right thing. So that would be one option. The other option is, if we can't get rid of the ordinance, is to either remove the section that we call the special provision, or change it, or at least make it better known. And then finally is to add clauses that the city manager or the traffic engineer installs the speed humps.
Mr. McGee, I have a question on the special provisions. Is that basically the request that you get through special provisions? Is that the majority of the speed humps, or is it through the residential requests?
Actually, since I've been here almost 2 years, I think I've gotten 2 residential requests. And all the rest have been installed through council action.
Yeah, it seems from what I'm hearing that maybe council may just, they're not aware of the ordinance, and if they are, they're not really following the ordinance. So I think maybe education, you know, to them, and Mr. McGee, I agree with maybe some of your recommendations as well. You know, yeah, it just seems that we're installing speed humps incorrectly.
And my point is, you know, whether I'm the traffic engineer or somebody else is that, you know, we rely on studies, MUTCD, and those kind of things to determine where these things get placed. You know, that it's a matter of driver expectancy. And what really, I guess, threw me for a loop when I first got here was that we had an ordinance specifically for speed humps, but we don't want to, I guess, go where they're telling me where to put stop signs, where to put yield signs, where to do those kind of things. You know, this is all an engineering decision. It should be handled as such.
Mr. Dickey, go ahead, sir.
I would like to comment. Number one, it seems like we've got, 8 different fiefdoms, and they're getting what they want. We should do what Mr. McGee thinks is best, because I mean he's a traffic engineer, and make it policy, not an ordinance, because you know you can. And I hate to say it, but I was born and raised here. I don't care, and I've seen it. You know, I hate to. Well, let me get my compadre over here. Vote for me. Let's get these go. Así yo también te ayudo en el tuyo, instead of going by policy, which would make this work a lot better. And I think it ought to be left to the traffic engineer. That's my opinion.
Mr. Gonzalez, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just a question, Mr. McGee. So when you do your studies, even though you're given the instructions to proceed and put a speed bump or speed hump, what are those studies doing? Are they being presented to city council, or they're just for your benefit or their benefit? I mean, do they take action based off your opinion of that study?
Well, the way it's been happening, and unfortunately kind of COVID also got in the way of this, is let's say pre-COVID, I would attend the city council meeting and they're going to approve this item, and they'll group it up with 10 others, and I could raise my hand, and that's the best I could do. But if council wants to approve all these at one time, that they'll do that. As the meetings went virtual, that became almost even impossible, because it's hard to raise your hand, you know, in a virtual way, have someone. So it's there really isn't a whole lot of opportunity to comment on these. I've taken the liberty of getting these studies done, even though it costs money and effort, just so to show that at least myself and anybody who wants to see it, that a lot of these are not necessarily needed, as opposed to someone's perception because they saw one guy at 10:30 at night flying down the road, and to them that's a lot of cars, and that kind of thing.
I appreciate it. The study, I think it's clear off the studies or what you presented here. It's clear that most of those were not needed in those areas. I'm not saying a lot of them were, but they are not following guidelines. And two, so on the follow-up question to this is, so right now, each individual city council pays for the speed bumps or speed humps in their district. If this is removed from them, where would this be funded from? Still from their district?
Well, the original intent of the ordinance is that the citizens put the money together. You know, there was 75% of the citizens had to sign a petition, and those 75, if they felt very strongly about it, you know, they would all pony up, you know, maybe $100, $200 each, and then it get built. Because I do get a lot of calls, and I mean a lot, of people saying, I didn't want it. You know, and I'm assuming it's one person or two people that asked for it, and it's their word is taken that it is a problem. And that's the reason I go out and do those studies. But I'm sure there are a lot of streets that do need speed humps, but they should be based on actual data and not just somebody saw somebody flying down the street.
So do we need to take action on it? What's our next step here?
Yeah. Well, I'm not looking at the agenda, but it's kind of hard for me to get off this web, I guess, sharping you guys off. But I think we put it down as a discussion and action item. Is that right, Erica?
That is correct. Yes, sir. It's a possible discussion and possible action on the speed hump ordinance.
Okay. So based on what I showed you, I'll leave it at your discretion. What do you think our next step should be?
Mr. Dickey, go ahead, sir. You have a comment?
Oh, I'll make a motion to remove the ordinance out from the Court of Ordinances and make it a speed bump policy. And in that, Mr. McGee and take charge of that, and with the approval of the city fire and police chiefs. Period. That's my motion.
I agree, but should we not bring it up through our city council and then see what they decide on doing with this? Or
they can vote, you know, if we pass this motion, then they decide to vote, then it's on them.
Well, what I would suggest is if you all are in agreement and you're all voting that you want to pursue that, I take your vote and I go to council and present this. You know, I think I need to do a better job. You guys grilled me pretty good about some of these things, so I need a bit prepared. But I take this presentation to them and I present it the same way I did to you, and then they can decide for themselves. And I can tell them it was presented to your advisory committee, and your advisory committee voted thusly.
okay.
Mr. Fue, go ahead, sir.
Yes, and you know, while I'm in support of the actions that we're interested in taking here on this, I think we still need to maintain some kind of a balance. Yes, I believe that all speed humps should be looked at in a data-oriented, traffic-oriented situation, but I still think that they would require approval from the council. Because they represent those within their district, and if it would be the burden of proof on the traffic engineer to bring forward the data to the city council and say, we would like, you know, we've looked at the data and we believe that this is the right location for the speed hump, and then the city council say, well, based on that data, we would support that location, and I think it would be bad of the city council to go against what the data shows, and if there's an accident, they would likely be held responsible. So I think we need to tread lightly in some regards, push forward, and I guess I'm still in agreement with that the traffic department should manage the speed humps. And if a council member comes forward and says, I need a speed hump here, and the data doesn't support it, I think that he just needs to be able to tell his constituents that the data doesn't support it, and it's out of his hands. So that education process is going to have to take place with the council.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey, you have a comment?
You've made a very good point, but I think maybe this would take the onus off of the councilman, you know, because he'll have his, you know, I need it here and and then so he feels like he has to, where all of a sudden it's taken, you know, oh, but we don't have that ordinance anymore, and we have a department head, and we've got to, and he'll study it, and I'll call that department head and I'll tell him, hey, you need to study it. I've got some constituents, and let him do his study, and then decide from there, and let him, Mr. Councilman, it's not a good fit here, and he's already shown us reasons, and I'm, excuse my age, but I may need an ambulance one of these days somewhere, and I've I have speed humps in my neighborhood, but I don't like them because I want them to get there in a hurry.
Yeah, and I take that and I agree with it. And like I said, it should be related to what the traffic engineer determines as the data. Although I do express some concern as well as obviously as a resident, if a speed hump is installed in my area and, I wasn't informed that it was coming. I wasn't educated as to why. I might be opposed to wanting to see it. And I don't have any problems with the way the traffic is now, but someone would just have to show me that, look, this is the reason why. And then that's where it takes the onus. So like, I agree with you, Mr. Dickey, it takes the onus off of the council and puts it more into data form to present to constituents and to the city council.
So let me get that. Okay. Yeah, Jeff, I'm glad you brought that up. I know you're very, very aware of the way the P&Z works. It is, there's certain things that, and I'm sure it's required by law, but that's just an example that when they're going to do a zone change or a SUP or something like that, they're obligated to contact all the neighbors within a certain distance and let them know and give them a chance to give their opinion on whether they want this thing, because it's going to affect them every day.
Which is what I believe that needs to be in the policy. I agree with the fact to get it out of an ordinance, but place it in a policy and have that requirement in the policy. So maybe we do keep some, it's still the 75% have to be in favor of it within the policy, or some higher number or something like that, just to go with something like that, or lower number, whatever you feel appropriate.
So
the next step would be,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the next step would be, to have Mr. McGee represent our wishes to possibly remove the ordinance like other cities have done and place it in a policy, and that policy to include, still include some kind of council approval and or resident approval. Is that what you think would be the way to go, Dan?
Well, that's one way. It may be a little more extreme as opposed to a subtle move. The other would be to present this, and especially the special provision, to explain it better, to make them aware, and that you guys agree that that's the way it should be used, is that it's not just put an address and let's build it, as opposed to this council can ask for it, but after a study is done, that the other provisions are enforced.
Well, I would certainly be willing to take our directive to my city council member that I represent and advise him of why we decided to go with this route and the benefits of it, and help to get him on board with it.
It's a pretty major thing that we're looking at. If perhaps you want to table this to the next meeting and then vote on it then and bring back, after you talk to your councilman, that's another way to go.
That was my next comment, gentlemen. We do have a motion on the floor by Mr. Dickey. Should we vote on that motion, or should we table the item after we discuss this with our council members?
I'll make a motion to table the item until we have a conversation with our individual city council members, and then bring it hopefully back to the next, our next meeting. But I think we have to withdraw. Fred, do we need to withdraw yours, or you want to continue with it?
Correct, yes, because we still have a motion from Mr. Dickey. Mr. Dickey, do you still want to move forward with your motion?
Just a point of discussion. I think that even if when we go to we're entrusted in this position to make decisions
Right.
for our councilmen. If we go to them, are they going to be afraid to say, well, no? Are they want to keep that power? Oh, yes, I'll get you whatever you want. That's just a thought. If y'all think that the consensus is here that I should withdraw my motion, I will. But those are my thoughts. But I'm pretty assertive. I'm sorry. But if consensus is for me to withdraw my motion, I will.
In my opinion, it's always good to go to your councilman with items such as this that affect him directly and how his constituents view his decision making. So I would be inclined to want to table it as well. Although I've already spoken with my council member on this subject, and he's in support of what we're wanting to do.
So can we remove Mr. Dickey's motion and then entertain Mr. Gonzalez's motion to table the item once discussion has been had with council members?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Gonzalez to table the item. Second. I'm sorry, second that my screen is messing up.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dickey. All in favor, please say aye or please raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. All right. Item number 2, discussion and possible action of the following tractor trailer parking in the city. Mr. McGee, go ahead, sir.
Okay, hopefully I can share this also. Give me 1 second. Can you guys see the presentation? It says I'm sharing my screen, but maybe I need to start over. Here we go. Here we go one more time. These are only like 3 or 4 slides, so I'll just go ahead and leave it in that view if you don't mind. Can you guys see your screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is a subject that comes up very, very frequently, and I'm not really sure there's a good solution, honestly. I'm just bringing this up to see how you guys feel about it. Truck parking in the city, Laredo lives and dies on trucks, and to try and do a whole lot about it, it affects a lot of people and a lot of commerce, a lot of businesses. However, lately, more and more, we're getting a lot of complaints about trucks parking on streets. For a while, they were confined basically to the industrial parks, and it wasn't so much a problem because, they're amongst each other. But a lot of these are being taken home now. The tractor itself, sometimes a whole 18-wheeler, and they'll park outside somebody's driveway and they try to come out and they can't see around it. So the problem that, as I see it, is we have ordinances that prohibit this parking already. Let me go through those and then I'll expand on what the situation is. You guys can see from these pictures, these are taken from city streets. They're parking off the road, on the road, tractors. I'm going to go ahead and read that first ordinance that we have. It says, truck parking on residential street and private property is unlawful. It says, it shall be unlawful for any person owning or having control of any truck to stop, stand, or park the same on any public street adjacent to a residential lot, which is zone R1 or R1A, RS, or R1MH. Okay, so this one specifically prohibits anybody from taking their tractor home and parking it outside their house. And we get a lot of that. Our parking officers go out and we give a lot of tickets for that. Obviously, some of the things is that it tears up our streets. It takes up a lot of the parking. Cars can't see around them, et cetera, et cetera. Let me go to the next slide real quick. We have an ordinance that says that parking is prohibited in certain places. It says, except when necessary to avoid conflict with the traffic, no person shall, and then it goes through a whole list, on the sidewalk, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we have one specifically, let me bring that up. It says, on any public street alley, or other public place or property belonging to the city by any vehicle exceeding 35 feet in length or 10 feet in width without a permit issued by the traffic manager. Well, if you know 18-wheelers, they all go over 35 feet. Okay, so if the other ordinance wasn't enough, then this also is enforceable. Okay, and then I'll go down to the last ordinance that we have. Here we go. It says, and this one is really all encompassing, really. It says, no person shall stop, stand, or park overnight any agricultural vehicle, commercial vehicle, semi-trailer, trailer, or truck tractor, irrespective of length or width, on any public street, alley, or the public place belonging to the city. So this one, I mean, it really gives all the details of who or what, and you just cannot park these vehicles overnight anywhere. Okay, so you could say, well, our ordinances are very simple, right? They're all there. But the situation is so widespread and pervasive that where do we start and where do we stop? I get calls that there's a truck parked on a major street. Well, there's 20 other major streets that have the same kind of parking. So in my point of view, out of fairness, I say, okay, if I'm going to enforce it here, I didn't enforce it everywhere else. I just can't pick one street because one person had a complaint with it and then not the other one. So that's the quandary to me, is that we have ordinances that are telling everybody, it's telling my officers, it's telling the police, it's telling everybody, code enforcement, that these trucks cannot be on our streets. But the reality is that these trucks don't have a whole lot of places to park. There's a lot of businesses that have been around for many, many, many years and never had enough parking because they were using the street anyway. And then they've grown even more. So now they're parking the trucks out on the street. And the other way to look at it is, okay, well, I'm the owner of a new trucking business and I bought 30 acres to make sure all my trucks are on my property and they're not on the city streets. So he spent millions of dollars on a piece of property while another guy is using the streets as his parking lot. But if we kick those trucks off those streets, where do they go? So you see how it's a big problem? So I think it's one that needs to be addressed because the complaints are coming in more and more and more, and it's becoming a safety problem. That's the end of my presentation. Hopefully you have some questions or discussion.
Mr. Dickey, you have a comment, sir? Go ahead.
Why aren't they being enforced?
Well, for years and years, are the parking officers that are under the traffic department, we were concentrating all our efforts downtown, the parking meters. That's when things were good, So we had enough to keep our officers. As to why the police weren't, I don't know. I'm sure that they have other duties and tasks that keep them away from this, possibly. I'm kind of guessing. And the same thing is that, I'm not sure the political will is that we remove all these or not. But at the same time, if we're going to allow them to be somewhere else, then don't complain about where they're everywhere else. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place on this, and I'm looking for some help, some guidance, some opinions.
Mr. McGee, and what do you recommend, sir? Any recommendations for the committee in order to possibly maybe not resolve it, but to help with this problem?
Well, one of the things that we've been doing is the residential ordinance. That one, our parking officers know that one is is a no-brainer. We're going to give tickets to that no matter what. No warnings. They're not supposed to be there, and they know it. So that's being done. We're kind of easing up to the bigger problem, but there are a lot of streets where it's just wall-to-wall trucks. I'll give you a good example. Is anyone familiar with Riverbank Road, where it comes off of Killam and goes down to Loop 20?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We just finished restriping that a few months ago because previously they had removed all the truck parking on the street. So we went back and created some truck parking, even though the ordinance says you're not supposed to be there. like I said, it affects the city's bottom dollar, and we just don't have a good solution. Smarter than people and me, I've talked about, for the city to do some kind of a major parking lot where these trucks can wait, whether being called into the individual warehouses. But where would that be, and how many, and that kind of thing? So,
Does the city, oh, go ahead, Sheila.
I was just going to say, I think there's two different issues we're talking about here. You have the owner operators who live here and need to park their truck at their homes or their place of residence. And then what you're talking about on the riverbanks, that's your actual business owners that own these freight forwarding companies and trucking companies. So we tackle one at a time. I totally agree. And I was going to mention to you, can we, or is there room anywhere we could do like a park and ride for these owner operators, not putting a truck at their home, have them park it in a parking lot and have their wives or spouses or friends or somebody pick them up to and from. And this way it's off the street.
That idea is, like I said, it's been kicked around, but it always comes down to a matter of money, which is number one. And then number two is where do we put them? I'll give you a good example. Norma and Roger, you guys still on the call?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell them how our parking lot downtown that we used to have, how it was used?
We used to have, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We used to have a parking lot right in front of the one that used to be Los Dos Laredos Park on Pedregal and Santa Maria.
It's right next to the river.
Yes, we used to make over $1 million, and that was passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles. But when the outlets came down to Laredo, they requested to have enough parking spaces for all the stores, and the city gave up that parking lot. So now the commercial vehicles don't have a place to park.
A lot of them are from Nuevo Laredo, and so they park here and walk across the bridge.
Yeah, they used to, not anymore.
That was a hell of a revenue stream.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Well, and I'm sure it was done for the right reasons. I'm sure the numbers pointed that it was a good thing for the city, and there's no discussing that, but we're just talking about the effects of what happened is that we lost that availability for people to park there and do what they needed to do. So,
right.
So that's what I'm kind of pointing to is that we need more than one super parking lot on the north side of the town. And where would that be? And then we get into areas of environmental concerns and that kind of thing. So it opens up a big Pandora's box also. So like I said, this is a very big problem, but it's the city's bread and butter, the trucking. So
right.
we can't do too much that affects them, but we just want to get a handle on it because safety and operation.
If there's $1 million a year being made, why don't we look for somebody in private enterprise?
Yeah, that's been discussed also. Nobody's come forward though.
I don't know what the investment is, but I'm sure, we have enough money in this town. There's people with some heavyweights that can do stuff like that. It's true.
I really think this problem is so delicate, so complicated that I'm not sure we can come up with a solution that really works. I know we all have good ideas, and for every idea we come up with, there's going to be a pero, but I think we probably need to study, but it's kind of hard for anybody to point to anywhere else that has our trucks. So.
Well, I've got a question. Who's second biggest to Laredo? And how many trucks do they have, and what do they do?
Well, just to give you some perspective, we think we have a lot of trucks here in Laredo, and we do. And the reason it's that many is because we're confined to a small space. But, San Antonio has more trucks going on I-10 through it than Laredo does, but they're just going through, and they're on the freeway, and they're not stopping, and they're not parking. And so the amount of trucks is one thing, and how that they're being used is the other thing.
I just know there's a lot of warehouse space that's empty, a lot of warehouses, especially in the modern industrial park area of Santa Maria. I mean, there's two issues, like I mentioned earlier. We have the owner operators, and we have your major trucking companies here, or your Mexican companies that are opening up. And I think if we tackle one at a time, especially, and give the owner operators a place to park their truck, not their trailer, because most of the time they're not taking the trailer home. Most of the times it's mostly the truck. That's my opinion. I'm not sure if I'm right on that. I'm just saying if we could look for something where we could give them a place to park instead of their home is a thought.
Well, unfortunately, the reason I brought this challenge to you, I'm not going to call it a problem. This challenge is, whenever we do anything in engineering, you come up with different scenarios, but the one you always include is the do nothing, leave it alone. And sometimes in traffic, that's the easier solution. Is just to leave it alone. In this case, it's been like this for many, many years. But unfortunately, I'm being asked to go out and move trucks out of the way in certain areas, and that's where I find it a little hard to do that, and I'm not doing it citywide. Maybe we pass other ordinances that say these streets are good and these streets are not. I don't know. Like I said, it's a very complicated problem.
It is complicated, but sometimes it's not fair for somebody's neighbor for a guy to come park his big truck, next to him, because it does. I mean, well, why don't we do this? Those big warehouse owners let's let them park a truck there in front of their house over in Plantation or, yes. I mean, está bueno allá para el barrio, but hey, don't come near my house.
Maybe the ordinance needs to be looked at on a impediment type of situation. If the trucks are parked in such a way that is impeding the flow of traffic, then they'll be cited or would have to move. If they're parked in such a way that's not impeding a traffic situation or blocking a view of a business or something like that, then maybe we do say okay to certain things. But I kind of think with CELA, we need to look at it on two different aspects. We need to look at it from the owner-operator scenario and from the tractor-trailer business scenario.
Yeah, I made this comment earlier, and I'll just bring it up again just as a reminder. But that solutions have come up, but I'll get this always from the bigger companies that bought all the land and says, "Hey, I spent a lot of damn money getting parking for my trucks, and then for someone else to use the city right away as their parking lots," and they don't feel that's fair, of course.
Oh, absolutely not. And I think that those businesses that operate with that type of vehicle, those tractor trailers, and they don't have adequate parking for their operations, should be cited and or shut down somewhere.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Quay. Yeah. So what's our next move? 'Cause I think we could talk about this subject all night on one whole meeting and still not find a solution to it. Well, what would be your recommendation, Mr. McGee?
Yeah.
Well, you're the advisory committee. Advise me, please.
We will. Well, all right.
We will.
You eat another one bite at a time. What bite do you want to take?
Do we have a maximum fine amount?
Well, that's some of the things that Norman, Roger, and I are working on. Is some of the fines are ludicrous. Which is the one, Norman, that's got a $10 fine on it?
Uh-huh.
Is it the overnight one? Or I forget which one. It's like $10. That's one thing.
So that's kind of where I'm going with it. If we're going to have to solve the situation, maybe we need to build up the revenue to solve the situation. If the situation is to provide public parking for the owner operators in a park and ride type of situation, we need to build the facility. To build the facility, we need to increase the citation value and make it more of an ouch to those that are doing this. And and get with our,
Well, and
those enforcing the payment.
remember earlier I mentioned about, we do one thing and then something else comes up. We started enforcing a lot of the current parking regulations. I'm talking cars and trucks in the neighborhoods. And so we were doing that a lot. And then we get accused of being too aggressive because then the citizens start calling. And so that's the other part of it is like the politics, the citizens, how they feel about it. But I do like increasing the fines, and maybe we can bring back on our next meeting to show you a comparison to what existing fines are, and then maybe we toss around some ideas of what they should be increased to.
That was gonna be my suggestion, if we could get a copy of the current fines and
Sure.
how much of it is being enforced and not paid. Any information, additional data we could get on that would be great.
Okay, we can do that. Like I said, I just wanted to really kick the ball off here, get it going, just to show you how a big problem this is. And honestly, there are many solutions, and everything has consequences, repercussions.
Well, I'm kind of liking, personally, I'm kind of liking it, a reevaluation of the traffic fine schedule, and then in accordance with the do nothing situation. I mean, we just increase the fines. We start not overly enforcing it, but getting it out there, and then maybe the problem starts to dissolve over time, as opposed to needing to directly figure out a solution.
All right. You want to take the how do you eat an elephant approach, one bite at a time?
That's the idea, brother. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we'll have that presentation for you next time, and same thing. We'll put it under discussion and action, possible action.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. That sounds like a plan. Thank you. Any more discussion, concerns, questions regarding item number 6, tractor trailer parking in the city? All right, moving on. Item number 7, we don't have anything. Item number 8, open discussion. I don't believe we have anything either, unless committee members, did you all have any items that you want to bring up or any discussion?
No, sir.
I think we covered a lot tonight.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Dickey. All right, then item number 9, adjournment. I have approximately 7:23 p.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Motion by Mr. Dickey to adjourn. Second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Gonzalez. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. McGee, to your staff. Thank you all for joining us. This is the second meeting that we have quorum. Hopefully we can continue with these meetings. So we'll see you all.
I do want to thank everyone. I know these are very heavy topics, and thank you for listening to me and indulge me. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm sorry I'm a little aggressive too.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.